Alana, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Real Talk. And oddly enough, I feel like it's a bit odd for me to welcome you to something that you have been a part of from the beginning.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally?
This is an illusion.
Is this real life?
Is this real?
Welcome to
I need to know.
What is real? How do you define real?
Bienvenido.
Accueillir. You merely adopted the dark.
Welcome to Real Talk
Real Talk.
I was born in it.
with Shadow Walker.
Little do you all know, we have the privilege today of sitting and chatting with Alana Grace, who is quite literally the source and inspiration for this entire thing. And we're going to have her tell us a little bit about it here in a moment, if we can. But first, just want to say hi. How you doing? Welcome. How you feeling?
Hey, Ruby.
Hey.
I feel so nourished in this moment. There's rain behind us, and we're here in Costa Rica.
It's raining, as it tends to.
As it does.
It started raining harder just as we started doing this. Yes.
But I feel open. I feel that it's been a very creative day, and I'm excited to put words to the things that we've been doing.
And you've been doing stuff since 5 o'clock this morning, I think. For something we'll get to a little bit later in the edition. So we'll hold off on that exactly. But I'm glad you're feeling good. Super impressed. Been watching you do a lot of amazing stuff. And a lot of people who are watching right now have had a chance to see me splattered all over the internet. YouTube, Spotify, the ridiculous video of me battling a tree, which happened just over here. And right now we're sitting at the Mountains to Sea event center, which has been kind enough to host us, and we'll be hosting again. A little surprise thing that we're talking about in a minute. But since everyone knows everything about me, because that's what I talk about all the time, why don't we talk a little bit about you? So there's a couple things. I'll throw it to you, and you take it however you want. But basically, a couple things I'd be really interested in hearing, and everyone else getting to hear, is what's your perspective on the origin story that got us here? And along with that, the process and the feelings and what's come up as we've gotten to this point. And I'd love for them to understand, I'd love for everybody to understand kind of what that represents for you. Because I think it's pretty epic. So what do you think?
The origin story.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, well, we've been friends for a bit now, and you know that I teach yoga. I've been teaching yoga for about 9 years now, and I needed a place to film a class, and so I happened to be at your house, and Ruben set up a really great, it was a mini little production we had going on.
I like that you say really great. It was me with an iPhone and a selfie stick.
Hey, it was better than just putting a phone against an eye, like a can or a block.
I make a great selfie stick. Run around, get angles, zoom in.
We got some angles. So, I taught that class, and then I remember coming out from the kitchen, and you stopped what you were doing, and you were like, "What was that?" I thought you taught yoga, and I was like, "I teach yoga, I do." And you said really kind words. But basically, it felt that you were reflecting that it was an experience, that I not only led people through a practice, but it was more of a journey. And yeah, so with that, you reflected to me feelings of authenticity, of realness, of embracing duality, of speaking to people in the body in a way that feels genuine and not performative. And from there, we stayed up and
very late
and just jabbed. You spoke and I wrote, and then here we are.
Just like that.
Just
step one, get the idea. Step two, step three, prosper. I also appreciate that you really humbled down how much my reaction was, because like she said, I set it up and I left it be and made sure that everyone got into the Zoom. And when she got done, then proceeded to freak out like I'd never seen yoga, and like he performed some magical sacred rite in front of people. Because that's exactly how I felt. I've done yoga, believe it or not, based on my reaction, it's true. And oftentimes what I feel in yoga is this sort of, here is a particular set of things that must be done, and do these things, feel those things, and you should feel it here, blah, blah, blah. And then you get up and you're like, yay, I've checked off that box. And so it feels like while yoga might once have been a practice of personal growth, development, meditation, I, at least in my experience, have grown very used to mainstream yoga. And so when I learned that you were a yoga teacher, I went, yay, and figured that looked a lot like what I usually see, which is wonderful. I don't mean to belittle that. But another part of what I saw when you did that Zoom class, which I hope is saved somewhere, we should grab snippets of that, was the embodiment of flow state. The teaching was a flow state. And I think that for all of us, that's what we're really looking for in a lot of things. You're looking for that thing where you slip away a little bit and the wisdom and experience and inner self, the authentic part of yourself, comes through and you do channel something. So I was extremely inspired. And I remember in that conversation that reflecting on what you were doing, it felt like the format of yoga was restrictive. You're much more than just a yoga teacher. You're a dancer. You have your own movement practices. And again, modern yoga seems to lock you down a bit. There's certain, what are they called? The asanas.
Asanas, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know yoga. And you have to go through like a rule book, and there's like a particular certifications and all this stuff, and there's hierarchies. And then on top of that, I think another thing we touched on in that conversation is, I guess like what you might call the yoga babe phenomenon. I'm a pretty good looking dude. I'm terrified to go in a yoga class. You just see like 40 perfectly shaped bodies in outfits that leave very little to the imagination. And that seemed counterproductive to what you'd spoken to, and the embodiment and the feelings. So, we touched on this idea of real yoga and started moving past it a bit. So, with that in mind, like, what does your own grander embodiment practice look like? You have yoga and you're trained in that, and that gives you a permission and people have confidence in you to teach them something. How far beyond that do you feel like your own development and your own learning has gone? What else is in there just beyond yoga for you?
Yeah. Thank you for all of those words. And
Kind words for you.
I think origin, there's something there, and I have always been a mover, and my background is in dance, and I think one of the conversations which led us to where we are, which I loved so much, is the idea that yoga can feel super cliquey, elitist, a certain way, and how when I first entered the yoga space, I felt broken. I felt I felt like I'm known to be an embodied person, but I've been referring to my body as a machine or something that I can just like beat up and it's just malleable. And through yoga practices, they taught me to slow down. And I think asana, the physical practice, is the place where a lot of people dip their toe in to know what yoga is, because yoga is one of the 8 limbs. Patanjali, one of the philosophers of writing a certain lineage of yoga says that there's 8 limbs, and asana is one of the pieces of the pie. That's not really it, but for so many people it's the doorway in, because we have meditation, we have all of these other ways, but for humans to sit still and go inside, that's terrifying for most of us. Like Shavasana used to terrify me, having to sit with myself and be in my body in silence. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Now it's my favorite place because I've learned to be with myself, but that took years. That took 9-10 years. I've been battling with eating disorders and depression and codependency and all of the things that are so human, but all in all, they've led me to now. And I think that the more we can deconstruct what yoga is and really keep inviting people to it, it's for everyone. You don't have to be able to touch your toes. That's the most often thing that I hear. I don't practice yoga because I'm not flexible. It's like, that's not the point. The point is so much more. I
feel very seen right now. I'm touching my toes now.
And that's valid. I get it. But how could you not feel that when you see different brands portraying these handstands and all these acrobatics, which is beautiful, and I know there's a lot of people who resonate and learn from that kind of style, and it's amazing to see what the human body can do. So I don't want to bypass or belittle that kind of yoga, but how is yoga for everyone? How can we move from the survival mode and being in that darkness of feeling broken and feel welcomed into a space? And so beginning teaching, that was my promise. If I can give back this much of what yoga gave me at that point, I've done it. And so to be able to land in my body, to be around an eclectic group of humans. I was in New York City for my 200-hour training, and there weren't mirrors. So I was used to, my whole life was looking at a mirror all day, analyzing my body, hypercritical. I wanted to be perfect. Perfect was my goal. I wanted to look flawless. I wanted to be skinny. I wanted to be loved. And I felt that if I checked those boxes, then I was worthy of love, then I was worthy of my purpose, then I was worthy of success. And when that crumbled, I lost sight of who I was, and I lost my identity.
Did that crumble? When you say that crumbled, was there a particular moment? You're doing 200 hours. So you started yoga in New York. You said 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And you said that crumbled. What was there a particular?
Yeah, I had a lot of dislocations and injuries in my body. And finally, this shoulder's been dislocated 10 times, this one twice. So, but the injury that led me to yoga was an inflamed coccyx, which is called...
Sorry, what?
Yeah, coccydynia.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Little do we know.
I would never have asked. I never assume.
It's a thing. Coccydynia.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I eventually, my physical therapist was like, try yoga. And I was so closed off to yoga because I'm a dancer. I'm flexible. I don't need to do stretches. I know how to stretch.
Of course.
So, yeah. So I went in there
yoga.
Yeah.
Look at how much I can touch my toes.
Yeah. My head is planted on my shins. So,
I'm just checking to see if the waterfall's coming in. It's one of the dangers of being in Costa Rica is every once in a while a new waterfall springs up. So it sounds like the audio guys feel like it's okay. So we'll just let that
we got
waterfall.
We got it okay.
So you injured yourself and your physical therapist said yoga and you said no.
No, I'm too, my ego was I don't need yoga. So I went to the studio in New York City and it was donation-based yoga.
The best kind.
The best kind. Mat to mat, 80 people. Tight, like sardines, and they're sweating on each other's mats, no mirrors. They're playing loud music. The teacher was telling you to feel your breath and your body. And I felt high being in there because everyone was so stoked. There was so much joy. And it was the first time that I think I saw people fully enjoying their bodies and all kinds of people, all walks of life, being there and enjoying what that was. And I was good at being in control of my body, but enjoying my body, I didn't know what that was like. So that's part of that's your 200 hours. That's my 200
hours. You have your
hours.
injuries. And then I know that, obviously over the course of 9 years, you, as most people, you learn, and the best way to keep learning is to teach. And so you begin to teach. And so you've taught at a lot of events, and you've done your own events. And now here we are in Costa Rica, which is not New York, you might have noticed. Slightly different, a little quieter, except for the waterfalls. And I know recently you were coming in from Colorado, And would you say there's a difference in what it's like teaching yoga or doing yoga, or sort of being exposed to yoga in somewhere like Colorado and New York than here in Costa Rica?
Wherever you go, there you are. And there is difference, obviously, and this environment encourages you to open, to land, to soften. Cities encourage tightness, protection. In the yoga space, hopefully you soften and you find safety, but this environment lends to that. But I don't think that your mind is your mind. And no matter where you are in the world, your problems are going to go with you. So I've quickly learned that in order to do our inner work, yes, the environment helps, but it's the inner work that actually makes the shift. So if I'm feeling depressed and I'm battling with my eating disorder, it doesn't matter if I'm in New York or if I'm in Bali or if I'm in, Japan at a beautiful whatever, I'm still going to feel those things. So yes and no.
I mean, if I was struggling with eating a lot and I was in somewhere like Japan, I would be doomed because I love sushi too much. But
I mean, fair.
It's just like, I give up. It's tough enough for me with little India down the street. But it's interesting to me, so much of what you talked about when it comes to yoga, and I have to react rather just genuinely, as one would hope on a talk show about authenticity. So here I am being caught rather surprised. You're talking about the mind a lot. I've done yoga. I've done online classes. I've been to yoga classes, much as my social anxiety asks me not to. Not mat to mat, very much off in the corner, far away from everybody. But so much of what you're talking about is the mind. How much of yoga now goes into that? Like, are they, like, when I think of yoga, I think of like, okay, hands up, down dog, this, that, move this. And they're talking a lot of body. Is that a difference in just how yoga has evolved? Are most people talking about the mind? Or is this more something you found that was important and that you focus on in particular, that mind-body integration?
That's a great question. I think the West has pulled it more and more from its roots and allowed it to be. I think there's a beautiful way that we can bring the two together. Yoga philosophy, which is a lot to do with the mind, and the ancient traditions and the stories like the Mahabharata, which is one of the ancient texts, which is all about war and battle and how the human condition, we're going to be in war, we're going to be in conflict, and that's part of it. So much of the history of yoga is about meeting those places, or that having that war and pulling out the significance, pulling out the meaning, and allowing that to teach us how to be more us. And what I'm seeing now in the yoga, like asana physical practices, is a lot of the warrior twos, the body. And I think that's an important place to start. But eventually, when you're allowing your body to do it, then that's when teachers can invite in more contemplation. And I think for me, when I feel safe in my body, then I can feel receptive to what else is coming in. So I think it's not right or wrong for teachers to be teaching directly to the body, because a lot of times we're disconnected from that. But ultimately, if you're in a handstand and you're thinking limiting thoughts and thinking how horrible you are and doubting your ability and who you are, I don't think that's advanced yoga. I think advanced yoga could be someone who has maybe taken a couple classes and can feel their breath and see how the inhale like lights them up and expands them, and be conscious and kind with their thoughts. I think that's advanced yoga, is being able to really dial in and feel into your body and be present, because ultimately humans think so much in the past and so much in the present. And so, like Ram Dass brilliantly says, is be here now. And it's such a hard practice to do these days, because we're constantly scrolling and consuming so much. So how do we be here now? And I think bring it back.
You got it.
Is that it all starts in the body. So the mind, yes, and it's really beautiful. And I think because I have been practicing with my body for so long, that's kind of like the next step for me is the mind. And how can I invite in my presence, my awareness, to see myself from a broader view? Like when we're so caught up in the emotion, and you've helped me a lot with this, of like, okay, this is Activation, I don't like the word trigger. And activation, like, can I pause and sit with it? This is what I'm practicing now, for 90 seconds. Because usually the feeling comes and goes in 90 seconds.
They tend to come and go pretty quick.
Yeah, but in those 90 seconds, we can like go to the craziest places. And so the mind is so important for me in the practice, because when we're aware of a deep pigeon pose, a deep hip opening, like you can go through an entire life cycle with one pose of what's coming up, of a story, of a trauma, of whatever. So you have to use something else besides your body to calm yourself down. And what are you going to use? Just likely your mind. Is the mind going to go and follow that story? Can we pause and have awareness? Can we think about, is this story serving me? Is it time to let it go? Is it time to pause and shift? Those are the kinds of questions I like to ask, because it asks us to be a participant in our life and to stop the, what's the robotic word? The cruise control.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. The cruise control. I'm to be present. Because how many times do we like get in the car and we go somewhere and you're like, wow, I don't remember that drive at all. But
I did
here
get
I am.
Oreos and I'm back home.
But
now,
I'm back
so.
home. So like those zoning out moments, which I think is okay, but it's just another reminder to be present. And I think the mind can help us in union with the body to get a little deeper into curiosity within the inner world.
Whew! No, I think you nailed that one. I mean, epic, first of all.
Sick.
And honestly, even just sitting here chatting with you about it, I am astounded at how you're tackling this thing that we brought up at the beginning of the conversation here about, like, yoga seems to have become, it looks a certain way. There's a certain clothes, there's a certain this, that, there's a certain class, there's a certain trend, there's all that stuff. And I think just within that short span, I would say that I could infer from what you're saying that yoga doesn't look particularly like anything. It's like one of the things that we talked about on that first fateful night when we stayed up late rapping about what possibly we could make to help the world in a way was, what does yoga look like for people who don't even have those bodies? What is yoga for someone who can't lift their shoulder that way? What is yoga for someone who doesn't have, or who's lost a limb in a tragic way? And then, how does that person feel? What is yoga for someone who can't use their legs and all this stuff? And, just in that short span, I mean, what it made me think of is I'm like, cool, how am I doing yoga right now? Like feeling, these different things, feeling this stretch. What is my body trying to tell me? As I've actually mentioned several times, or I mention all the time in real life, and I mentioned on the show before, it's like Matt Kahn says that we're not on a spiritual journey, our body is. And it's like, it reminds me very much of what you're saying there. It's just like, if your mind isn't there supporting you, what are you doing? And if in the case of yoga, you're just putting your body through a bunch of movements, and it's no different than working on a factory floor. It's like, yeah, I'm stretching my hamstrings, but I hate myself, and I'm not willing to look at that. Like, maybe there's another level to go into. So speaking of all the different ways in which you think about this stuff, and also taking a quick look around and noting that we are indeed in Costa Rica, that we have indeed managed to have you come down and bless us with your presence, and you've been practicing yoga on the daily, not on the mat, but in situations like with your car and the lifestyle down here, and that's part of what life in Costa Rica sort of asks you to do. You have to change your pace. You cannot, you can't get yoga to, or you can't get Costa Rica to stretch its hamstrings when you want to. Sometimes it's just like, I ain't moving. And so there's a lot of those things that have come up, but coming up here in December, you are going to be hosting a group of people for an event, the Unleashed event, a metamorphic journey, hosted by Alana Grace herself. And this is just a smattering of the things I know you've been compiling, and you've been working tirelessly on what that looks like. And it will be right here. This will be your view when you are coming down here to do, when you're doing the yoga portion of what is a much grander offering than just yoga. You'll be sitting here looking over that way. And one of the things I want to ask you about at the very beginning of it is what led you to shying away from or tactfully avoiding or strategically not using the term retreat and instead went for a journey. Because people are going to ask that question. Everyone wants to go on retreat to Costa Rica, and you are inviting people to a metamorphic journey. Alana, what is that? What does that mean?
I think the more life we experience, we are met with the invitation to embrace the journey. And the less force and the less resistance we have to a path leading a little differently, I think the more wondrous life can be. And for me, retreat is a place to chill and relax and drink pina coladas and I don't know, which is great and fun. And I think sometimes we literally need a retreat.
I'm going to retreat to my couch right after this.
Yeah, like we love a good retreat. But I am great at nurturing that kind of relaxation. But my work these days are asking more of human beings because I'm asking more of myself. I'm diving into the inner alchemy of what makes me me. I'm witnessing how I have a tendency to be small, to feel comfortable in the smallness, to be comfortable in not being seen. And through this work, I'm learning to step into who I am and to open up and to take up space. And I think that oftentimes we need a permission slip to do that. Okay. We have to have a reflection or maybe support or a guide or really great friends to ask us questions, to make us think a little bit differently. And this is a journey that is set up to take you through just that, a reckoning, an acknowledgement of where we've been. It's been a pretty hard 3 years. I don't think that we want to go back in time, but what can we make of what we're learning now? So it's taking real life experience. It's taking leaning into the things that we've perhaps shied away from in the past and learning to feel them in our body, actually somatic work of like, what does anger feel like in your body? How can we go to fear? How does that look like in your body? And allowing yourself to go there. And I've noticed while doing this work is eventually you soften when you give yourself full radical permission to be there. I hadn't given myself permission to like feel the fullness of jealousy, of anger, of resentment, like screaming, howling, putting pain on my face, like really getting ugly with it. And what I've learned in those kinds of practices is then it softens. Then after that is the sense of relief. And so weaving together the reckoning, the feeling, and then awakening, the expansion. Like what's on the other side of those things when we can free ourselves, when we can lean in to transform and alchemize those feelings, thoughts, stories, traumas into something else. And not to bypass them, they're going to be there, they'll still come up. But I want to give people tools to meet themselves where they are, to see in their real lives when something like that comes up, know that I got me no matter what, and I can bring myself back to center. And with all of that deep work, play.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because one of the most amazing spiritual teachings I've learned is don't take life too seriously. And I think that a lot of us on this journey can go so far into the left of like micro-analyzing everything and like doing the work.
No, you never do that. I've never seen you do that.
No.
I don't do that.
No, we don't. But yeah, and then there's a big element of like play and celebration and connecting with nature and being on the beach. And so we're going to be playing with that duality of, you know, inner work and outer expression and fun and connection and expansiveness. And yeah, I'm stoked.
So it's going to be 5 days, 6 nights?
4 nights, 5 days.
4 nights, 5 days. And some people are going to come on down here, be hosted at this space, taken care of in pretty much all the creature comfort ways, challenged, nurtured. And I can imagine, we're sitting halfway around the world from a lot of people who are listening to this. And a lot of people maybe haven't been to Costa Rica. And a lot of people don't know what it is they might even be facing or aren't necessarily even sure how to address what might be holding them back. And do you feel like you could speak to some of those fears that might come up for people, and like the people who might be wondering, like, is this for me? Am I the kind of person who is even capable of this? Because a lot of people, like we said, walk by that yoga studio and look in and go, like, I don't look like those people. That clearly isn't for me. And they miss that opportunity. So, for the people who may be a little afraid, a little unsure, or not sure if it's for them, like, who's it for? Who could benefit?
Yeah. I would check in with the body as people are hearing our words and hearing what we're saying. Like, where does it resonate? Where is there tension? Noticing how your body's responding to this kind of invitation. And I have had the absolute privilege of going on retreats and being able to like travel here and go to places I haven't really been before. And there's this layer of fear that is always there every time.
Oh, good.
Oh,
Good to know I'm not alone in my fear.
No, always. But that's what makes life exciting. Like, we know what we know because of where we are and what we've been through. But how could we, if this is curious, and as I'm saying that, I like feel the tilt of my head. And so if someone's like, I think it all starts with curiosity, and it doesn't matter what level of practitioner you are. It doesn't matter if this is going to be your first yoga practice. We all start somewhere, and it doesn't need to be only for those who are on the path, like, we all start somewhere. And what I love about Costa Rica is I've done a lot of firsts here. Like, learning Spanish, driving a stick shift car, not having cell service at night, and being like, now what? But I've made it out on the other side. Still standing. And all of these experiences that I've freaked out about or wondered if it's for me, and I don't know. And if I've said yes, I've learned something no matter what. And I think that this retreat is for those who are curious and who desire inspiration and connection. And I have been asking around where people feel inspired. It's in community, it's in nature, and I think Costa Rica is the most beautiful place to bring all of that together. And yeah, it's, not comfortable to fly to a foreign country if you've never traveled outside the US or somewhere else. Like, that's very real. It's scary because you don't know.
How appropriate. It's very real.
It's super real. And not to bypass that, not to be like, just trust us, woo, but it's like,
I trust you.
Thanks. We all got to start somewhere. And so maybe this is the invitation for your first time of like really stepping into the unknown. And like, what does unleash mean? It's like breaking free from the things that you normally do. What would that be like to like say yes to something that maybe feels uncomfortable? And if you resonate with the words and our words and the energy of this, like, why not? And I know that I'm not everyone's teacher. I'm not everyone's guide. And certainly people are going to know that it's not for them. And that is great because there are so many other people doing yoga retreats and other offerings. But for those that know, there's like a body that leans in. Like every time I kind of see an offering or someone, if you're like leaning in, literally your body, I'd say maybe think about that and feel into that a little bit more. Because Costa Rica has changed my life in all of the ways, and I can only speak from this body and this experience, but having events here and learning and seeing the transformation that happens when people say yes to themselves, it's priceless. And yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like having known you now for a good while, it's been a journey just to get you here to this place where I think having seen what you've gone through, and I will leave that for you to unveil for people in its appropriate time. But I mean, I think it's an amazing thing to learn things in this life and to take those lessons and then realize that we're never going to know everything. We're never going to be able to teach all the aspects of life, but we've learned a few things, and there's a few things that have worked for us. And you can turn around and say, hey, I've got some things that have worked. They might work for you. And I think a lot of the times people really shoot themselves short. It's like I'm in a similar place where people come to me for advice on various things. And it's only in the last several months where I've been like, oh, I have things that I could share with people. And I've seen what you've been working on. And I know that a lot of people could work with those sort of things. And the answer that I hear from what you just said is that it's for anyone. And there's a challenge and an offering and an invitation for anybody. And that'll be different for everyone. And I can say, I don't know all the inner workings of what you've put together just yet, kind of keeping myself out of it because I tend to meddle too much. So I won't be able to give away any secrets or details, but I can say that there's, on top of yoga, there are many other practices that you'll be offering. And I know that there are other guides that you'll be inviting to offer perspectives and lessons and practices. And on a logistical end, because I am a logistics guy, for people who are wondering, like how, a lot of times people ask me the question, how? And I love it when people ask me how, because so often that's the thing in our life that sort of holds us back. How could I do that? And in this case, we've answered a lot of those for you. Someone would really just need to get a plane ticket and come down. Because we're going to take care of all the things that maybe make you uncomfortable. We're going to get you from the airport. We're going to get you here. It's going to be all squared away. We're going to make sure you're comfortable. It is, as I know what you've been wanting to curate, a safe space. Because we can only grow from a safe space. It's very hard to grow from this place of survival. And my own personal mission has been very much helping my friends find the room to feel safe. And that's hard. But I'm sitting here right now, and I'm feeling pretty safe. And we've still got a good ways to go until it's all set up and ready to go. But I know that you and everybody who's working on this event are working very diligently and thinking very carefully about how to ensure the best of your ability that the people who lean in and are willing to take on that challenge and say yes to something that might feel a little bit challenging will be somewhere that is primed for them to grow. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's personal growth, maybe it's just a realization of something, maybe it's changing old patterns. But one way or another, I feel like anyone that comes down here for this event, the name will live up to it. And it comes in pieces. You know, we always think that there's gonna be some one big revelation, and we're gonna be like, I'm enlightened and I know everything and it's all better. No, it's like it's more like, what's that kid's story where there's the giant who's tied down by a million little threads? But it's more like that. It's more like there was just a million little threads holding you to the ground. And here, we have the opportunity to cut away maybe some of those. And there's a little bit more movement, a little bit more flexibility. And then maybe you could touch your toes, and that's a bonus feature. And then you can post photos on one of those social media things and get a bunch of clout and likes. But let's see. Speaking of, I feel like we've had a great chance to check in about these things. This is not the last time that you'll be on the show. As we mentioned, Alana is a co-founder of Real Overall, and also the lead behind Real Yoga, which we'll be bringing out a lot more content about. We'll be doing videos, there'll be offerings. You will see a whole bunch of other pieces come together. We've got some really special additions beyond that, unleashing Alana from yoga. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, Alana. Really excited to hear more about Unleashed. If you want to find more about Unleashed, there's going to be a link down below these videos, which you can follow, check it out, take a look, see what's going on. We'll put Alana's socials. If you liked this episode, this edition, please please comment, please ask questions. We're still trying to cultivate a conversation about authenticity and now what it means to be unleashed. So we're looking forward to seeing you next time. And for a few of you, we'll be sitting here with you in a few months. So thank you so much. Thank you, Alana.
Thanks, Ruby.